I'm not actually a librarian. I do work at the Enoch Pratt Free Library in the web department. Sorry. Okay. I've been working there since March. And so I'll be talking about web accessibility. To be honest, I find this subject to be fairly dull, but it's really important to what I do. So hopefully I can keep this nice and spiced up and interesting. So if you could advance. There is currently a statewide initiative going on at the moment to get all public library websites in the state 100% accessible. So the library will be leading the charge, the Pratt Library will be leading the charge on that because it is the State Library Resource Center. Please advance. Okay, you can go one more. I wasn't sure if I would have control over these. So Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act, that's the full name, it's a federal law and set of standards. So Section 508 covers at the moment anybody who receives money from the federal government to do what they do. Please advance. So normally when we talk about Section 508, we talk about it in the context of website accessibility, but it actually covers every kind of electronic technology, as you can see there, including devices and software and content management systems, all sorts of technology. Please advance. So the World Wide Web Consortium also maintains a set of standards that are international standards, and it's called WCAG 2.0, first implemented in 2008. I've forgotten what year 1.0 was, but it was very early on, like maybe 1998 or something like that. There will be a move in the next couple of years. I've forgotten the date exactly, but Section 508, as well as the state level standards, will both change over to just say, refer to WCAG. That's going to be the standard for everything in the United States, maybe in about 2 years. Please advance. So accessibility, the first thing that we generally think of, if you've ever heard of Section 508, is making your website accessible to the blind. Please advance. So it actually covers a lot more than just visual impairment. It covers color blindness, other kinds of visual impairment like glaucoma or nearsightedness, or there are some kinds of illness that cause you to have blurry spots in the middle or shaded spots or those sorts of things. Deafness, motor skills, this is a really important one actually. A lot of web users suffer from arthritis and can't operate a mouse very well. And so making your website navigable by keyboard can make a big difference to people like that. We also have to consider cognitive impairment, maybe somebody who has a developmental disorder or has suffered brain damage and is very slow at interpreting things or can't interpret websites or designs that are laid out creatively, I guess. And so we want to consider that, as well as seizure conditions. Luckily, the seizure triggering website design practices are mostly in the past these days, but you still see flashing images occasionally.
Link tag is good.
Yeah. Please go ahead. So there are four standards, four basic principles for making content accessible. So the first one is that content must be perceivable. So to anyone with any level of ability, the content on your website must be able to be perceived and interpreted. So this involves providing alternative text to non-text content, so commonly known as alt tags, but this refers not only to images but also tables and forms, which can be really difficult to interpret by screen readers and other assistive technologies. Transcripts for audio content. This is one of the most challenging things that we're facing at the library right now, because we have over 300 hours in audio podcasts. And it has been recommended to us that if we can't get them transcribed by the deadline, which is, it was the end of October, but it's shifting a little, that we should just take all of that content down, which is, you know, it's a difficult situation for us to be in, because there are plenty of, you know, people who can hear just fine who would benefit from that content, but this is one of the balancing acts that you face as a state agency. Don't use visual elements such as color or font to communicate important information. This is a really key thing. It's sometimes very difficult to tell the difference between something that's structural and something that is contents-based, but if you're working with a good designer, they can help figure that out. Things, for example, like if you have a red button for go and a green button, or a red button for stop and a green button for go, somebody with red-green color blindness can't tell the difference between those two things. So you need to make sure that there is text that's perceivable by the screen reader in order to make those accessible. Please advance. So the second principle is that the site must be operable. So as I mentioned, all functions available from the keyboard. Give users enough time to read and use the content. So a lot of times if you're like filling out a form, say in an Amazon checkout box or that sort of thing, there will be a timer placed on how long your checkout is held before you have to go back and start. That's considered inaccessible. So be sensitive to people who are moving more slowly through your content. The next one, obviously, no seizures. Oh, sorry, there's still one more point. Help users navigate and find content. So this refers mainly to your navigation. Make sure that the names of your headings are clear and indicate really in an obvious way the kind of content that is underneath those headings. Okay, next slide, thanks. The content must be understandable. To me, this one seems like the biggest common sense one, and yet so often the people writing content for the websites that we maintain don't really know how to write for the web. And so the more simple and clear your content is, the easier it will be to understand by people of all abilities. So use, no higher than grade 8 language, avoid jargon, and write in a logical order. Don't have two sidebars with, or two panels that have equal weighted information, or have the less important information coming before the more important information. You want to have a logical flow. You want to use best practice standards to make sure that your website operates in a predictable way. You want everything that they click on or mouse over or anything, you want to respond the way the user expects it to respond. When you have forms, you can help users avoid and correct mistakes by using asterisks next to required fields or fields that were missed. You can do an auditory signal to indicate that they have missed fields in addition to visual ones. Make it as obvious as possible. Go ahead. The site must be robust. So in this case, we're talking about compatibility with user tools. So there's a wide variety of assistive technology available, ranging in price. Every computer these days, every operating system has built-in accessibility support. But there are also tools like JAWS is a very well-known screen reader, but it costs thousands and thousands of dollars with upgrades coming out every year that you have to pay for. So you want to try and make your website work for the lowest common denominator of tools. One of the additional tools that we're only just starting to think about as an assistive technology is mobile devices. I've been reading a lot recently about iPhones and iPads being really good tools, both for the blind because they have excellent screen readers, but also for like kids with autism. It can help them interact with the world in a way that they've never done so before. Please advance. So this is the big question. This is something that I have struggled with on and off since getting into web design about 8 years ago. So I guess the first real answer is if your website is not accessible, you will lose valuable market share. So sometimes I think, well, my product, you know, it's photography or it's clothes, and maybe I don't care if blind people can't access my product because, you know, I'm targeting this particular audience. It's really easy to fall into that way of thinking and just sort of accept it as a business loss in order to cut corners. But you're missing out on a much larger market share than just the obvious, what you think of immediately as disabled users. I mean, senior citizens fall into the category of people that could suffer if your site's not accessible, and people who are nearsighted. Many of us in this room are probably nearsighted, and if you can't enlarge your website to make it more readable, the people will just go away and not buy your stuff. Additionally, typically you're following best practices by default if your site is accessible, and you're using good design principles by default. So your site will be better and it will last longer. And very soon it will be the law. Already it's possible for disability advocacy groups to sue private organizations. There was a pretty major lawsuit against Target maybe a couple of years ago, about 2 years ago, because their online store was not accessible to the blind. The library recently was threatened with lawsuit for circulating Nooks instead of iPads, which are more accessible. So this can happen to you if you become high profile, but even if you're not and people want to use your stuff. So we'll just go through the tricks and tools real quick. 2 minutes, is that what you said? Or am I almost done? I'm already 2 minutes over. Okay, really quick then. So there's a few tricks. Try operating your site like someone with a disability. So you can use the screen reader in your computer. You can blindfold yourself. You can disable your style sheets in JavaScript and see if your site still works when you do that. Some technical stuff: add alt tags, provide transcripts, closed captions, and descriptions. This is covered that a little earlier. So you want to use semantic markup. This is something that web developers in particular are concerned about, but if you're using a website even just in WordPress and you're updating your own content, these are things to think about. You want to call all of your content what it is. That's what it means to use semantic markup. So if you're quoting someone, use block quote tags. If you are using italics for emphasis, use the M tags instead of I tags, which are deprecated. Put your ordered lists in an ordered list tag instead of just numbering them. Go ahead. You want to follow good design principles. If you are using good design principles, then you will be more accessible to most people. So you see those there. Sorry to speed through like this. So additional tools and resources, there's all sorts of stuff on the internet to help you out with this. The World Wide Web Consortium Web Accessibility Initiative, they have a really well-developed site that they've been working on that has everything you would need to know. And I have links to all of these on my blog, which is at prairieskydesigns.com, and I have business cards if you forget that. So